Hey everyone, Cleo here and welcome to my channel, and today I'm giving you a book haul. So, as I've been saying for every past book haul, it's really astonishing that I did like my first book haul, I don't know even when. I did like my first book haul, I think at the end of the summer maybe, and it was really, I hadn't done book hauls before because I don't really buy that many books at once usually. But since saying that, I've been doing so many book hauls, it seems to me, and so I really need to contain myself here because if you see my recent video about digitalizing my unread books on these shelves, you know that I have a lot of unread books on these shelves behind me that need to get read at some point. And so ideally, I won't be buying too many new books to make sure that I actually manage to get this number down at some point. But here I am again with another book haul for you guys. I hope not to buy new books in the month of December and only have like the books that I'm gifted for Christmas added to this collection, but we will see. So first off, let me start with the books that I bought at the Antwerp Book Festivals. So every year there's an Antwerp Book Festival. I don't always go because I don't really support the fact that you have to pay to go in there, but I did get a free ticket from a friend of mine this year, and so every single time that I've actually been for free, I think, and so I love going there because you're just like stuck, you're just in like the book Valhalla. For me it's not always super interesting because I don't really read in Dutch, and so the majority of the books that you can find there are obviously in Dutch, which is the native language of Antwerp. But this year actually there was quite a lot of like publishers who had some English books on display, and then you also had Sterling Books, which is a bookshop in Brussels, which had their own kind of like place there in the book fair. So I got quite a lot of books done. I somewhat contained myself, I hope to say, but I still ended up with like 7 books that I bought. First up is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. So I really want to read this book because the third one is coming out in 2020. This book was nominated for the Golden Man Booker Prize, which is also why they did this nice golden edition of the cover for it. It did not win. The winner was The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje, but this actually made me more interested in Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, because before I wasn't that interested in it because it's a bit of a historical fiction political drama, which isn't necessarily my thing, even though I very much like watching these types of costume piece movies and TV shows. So maybe it's just because I haven't had the experience of reading a book like this, and maybe once I read this is going to completely change my opinion about them. So this is about, this is a Tudor era book about Thomas Cromwell. This is basically all I know. Thomas Cromwell was a big important figure at the times, and so I'm interested to learn more about his life and to see what the fuss is about. A lot of people are calling Hilary Mantel one of the greatest writers of our time, so I definitely want to experience some of her writing and see what I feel about it. Next up is a book which is in Dutch, and it's because it's a sort of like a self-help book, and this is a book, I'm not going to say too much about it. It's like, if I literally translated it, would be like First Aid with Procrastination. So it's a sort of like a guidebook about how to help you kind of get out of the procrastination cycle. And I'm a big procrastinator, so yeah, there's that. Next up is a Japanese classic, and it's The House and the Professor by, it always says Ogawa, but full name I guess will be inside somewhere, right? By Yoko Ogawa. So there's these are the, I think it's the Vintage, right? Yeah. So it's Vintage Classics. So Vintage has done a couple of these series. So they've done, for example, the Vintage Russian. So I have one of those in my shelves as well. I have War and Peace in that edition. Then you have the Vintage European. I also have a book in that edition, and now they've done Vintage Japan. So I think there are like 5 or 6 books that have come out in this beautiful version this year. I only bought one. I had to keep myself from buying more of them, but maybe I'll still succumb to them at some point, but they're absolutely beautiful. One of the other books in this edition, for example, is also Wind Up Bird Chronicles by Murakami. In case you want to get into Murakami, maybe you can consider one of these beautiful editions. So I had like 3 or something of these books in my hands, but I only took one, and the reason why I took this one is because it has like a catchphrase at the back, and it says, "How exactly does a man live with only 80 minutes of memory?" And that really drew my attention. So I don't know more about this book, but based on that I was just like intrigued enough, and the gorgeous cover really sold me as well. But so really looking forward to getting to that one. I have a couple of Japanese books on my shelves at the moment, so yeah, really wanted to get to those at some points. Next up is another Bill Bryson. So I recently finished A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson, and now I got a new one, and that is Notes from a Small Island by Bill Bryson. Really like Bill Bryson's writing. I do have another one of his on my shelves, but it's actually a maybe for me, because this is about the difference between American English and British English, and I started, but it really didn't interest me that much. Notes from a Small Island is basically, again, one of his more like travel style stories, and so the first Bill Bryson I read was Walk in the Woods, which is very much in this style, I believe. Walk in the Woods was about the Appalachian Trail. Notes from a Small Island are about his visits to Great Britain. So Bill Bryson is an American novelist who settled down in the UK, I believe, and so it's sort of his reflections on the British Islands, and I'm expecting it to be wonderful. Usually it's he has a very nice sense of humor. His sense of humor really suits my taste, and so it's very nice to read his travel literature, and also just I love traveling, and so I love travel literature as well, and to be like, it inspires me to go to these places and things like that. Not that I need a lot of inspiration to go to the UK, but still. Notes from a Small Island is often mentioned in like, if there's is one of his biggest bestsellers, I believe, so I really wanted to get down to it. Next up is a classic that I've been really wanting to read for like a year or something, since I started hearing a lot of people recommending it, and that is a book by Anne Bronte. So I have read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've tried to read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, but I've actually never really felt like inspired to read Anne Bronte. I always felt like she was like the lesser known Bronte, and that would mean that her work was less interesting or something like that. But then I started to hear from multiple people on BookTube that they really liked Anne Bronte's work, and they really liked in particular The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Now it's supposed to be about a somewhat emancipated woman, which is somewhat surprising for a Victorian era novel. So I believe it's about a single woman who moves in on her own into Wildfell Hall, and like her neighbor is very much intrigued by her, but apparently comes to regret his decision, and like it's very much of an enigmatic, mysterious character that gets unraveled, it seems like, when she presents him with her diary or something like that. But overall I've just heard that it's a book that was very much advanced for its times in terms of female empowerment and dealing with feminist subject matter, and so I really want to get down to it and read it and see what I feel about it. And then the last book that I got in the Antwerp Book Fair, I think, right? Yeah, I think so, is Killing Commendatory by Haruki Murakami. So as I said before, I still have some Japanese literature to read. This is one of them as well. So I have read The Colorless Suzuki Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage this year by Murakami, which was the last Murakami that I had on my shelves that I hadn't read yet. And so I had told myself that I couldn't buy another Murakami until I read that one, and so I finished this book, and so I was allowed to buy myself another Murakami. Killing Commendatory is the latest novel that has been translated into English of Murakami's works. I don't know too much about it, but I'm expecting it to be great, as every Murakami is. I think this is one more along the lines of his sort of traditional work versus Colorless Suzuki Tazaki. I felt it was more on the line of his contemporary work than it was on his like magical realism work, but I enjoy both of them, you know. I was pleasantly surprised by Colin Suzuki Tazaki, but I do also love his normal work. I love the typical character of the midlife crisis male, more or less. I love the interlacing of musical theory, or there's always some sort of music that's omnipresent throughout the book. In Colin Suzuki Tazaki there was one particular work of a piano work, I think, that was very much that was very much being referred to a lot of the time. A lot of times it's jazz music. Murakami also owns a jazz cafe. But so yeah, I'm very much, and then like all of the whimsy, the weird stuff, the typical elements that reoccur. I really love the atmosphere of Murakami, and so I really want to get down to Killing Commendatory as well. Next up, I have 3 books that I got in a thrift store in Leuven. These books still need to be added to my Goodreads TBR, so the stats on my Goodreads TBR are going to take another tumble back into the... I think I had like 130 or something unread books on those shelves, so add some 3 more to that. First up is State of Fear by Michael Crichton. I really love Michael Crichton, and so when I saw that there was a Michael Crichton in the second-hand bookstore, then I was like, yeah, that's for me. I don't know too much about it. It's once again one of these sci-fi thrillers. So it's basically about the way that some sort of a development in science has catastrophic consequences, either when it's in the wrong hands or when it takes on its own agency. So I'm looking forward to this one. I really want to get to more Michael Crichton, but I'm also afraid of finishing at some point because Michael Crichton has passed away. One of his books was published recently, but as far as I'm aware, he actually had almost no involvement. It's basically just his name that's being used to sell the book. So I'm not really interested in that one, for example, but yeah, I really want to get down to even more of his works. I've read some 4 or 5, I think, at this point, but as I said, at some point I'm going to be done with them, and that's going to be really sad for me. Next up is Atonement by Ian McEwan. So I am doing a video, I'm filming it actually today as well, about the authors I want to get into more in 2020, and Ian McEwan is also on that list. I have read his On Chesil Beach. I absolutely adored it. It was very short though, which I'm not holding that against it. I think it had the length that it needed to have, but I definitely want to read more of his work. I have seen the movie at some point, but I really don't remember too much about the movie. Maybe it'll come back while I'm reading the book, but as I've said before, actually for me, when I've seen a movie before and then I read the book, then I'm able to enjoy both. When I read a book and then I see a movie, then I can only enjoy the book in the majority of cases. But so Atonement, I think it's supposed to be about, so it's somewhat of a costume period piece. It's not as far back as some costume periods. I think it's more like, let's say, Roaring 20s or something like that. And it's about I think it's like a secret affair between 2 of the characters involved. But we are seeing it, at least in the movie, we're seeing it through the eyes of the sister, like the small sister, which I guess is the person presented here, the small sister of the female in the affair. And so I'm looking forward to it. I really liked On Chesil Beach. I thought it had the most beautiful opening scene that I've seen in the book in a long time. And so I'm looking forward to this, to exploring more of Ian McEwan's work. And then the final book that I got in the thrift store, and that I'm so happy that I got there, is The Binding. The Binding by Bridget Collins. It's actually a recent release. I think it got released in 2019 maybe even, or 2018 is also still possible. Where is the date? 2019. So this is a really recent release. I think it's in the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Fiction. It is definitely one of the most gorgeous covers that was released in 2019. And I thought I'd already examined the story behind this and that I found myself being like, okay, I'm not interested. But when I read the background, the back of this book, I was like, no, I haven't. And this is totally interesting, and I'm really unsure why I haven't delved into this before. But so basically, this is about a guy who is working as a bookbinder, and basically his bookbinding ability is so that he can kind of bind your memories into the book. So basically any sort of memory, any sort of feelings or whatever that you want to get rid of, that you want to that you want to reject, you can go to this bookbinder and he will bind these into one of his books, and then he will store them, all of those, he will store that book in his cellar along with all of the other books that he's done like that. And so one day when he's going down into his collection and strolling around through it or something like that, he sees that one of the books is actually bearing his name. So I'm assuming that this is going to be the discovering of like what were the horrible memories that he had tried to lock away, and maybe discovering the real reason why he needed to lock them away or something like that. But it sounds very interesting. It's a gorgeous cover. I'm really looking forward to getting around to it. I don't think I'll get around to it this year still, because I have quite a busy, overwhelming reading schedule for December, but yeah, I'll definitely want to get around to this in 2020. And then next up are some of the other books that I picked up before these actually, that really are just based off of interest that I had or stumbling upon them. First one of these is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So I'm currently on the reread for Stormlight Archive, but I want to read some more of his works. Warbreaker has been recommended a lot of times. It is at this point still a standalone, though there are some talks of him maybe doing a sequel to this one. And I think it has to do with like color theory. I think the magic system has to do with color theory in this one. But in any case, a lot of people say it's a very good way, very good place to start with Brandon Sanderson. It's because of it being a standalone at this point, and it is of a bit of a higher quality than, for example, his first published work, Elantris. But it is also part of the Cosmere, so the big overarching universe that he has created for his books, so I definitely want to get around to this one. And apparently a lot of there are a lot of Cosmere relations between this book and Stormlight Archive, so I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for those. Next up is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Now, N.K. Jemisin has won many awards for this series, so this is the Broken Earth trilogy. And I think each book won the Hugo Awards, or definitely the first and second books won them. And so, as far as I know, it's basically about Earth shutting down and Earth really being a sort of like main player in the story. Like it really has like its own agency, so natural disasters don't just like seem to randomly be striking, but it seems to be like really premeditated and stuff like that. That's the very fake stuff that I've been hearing about Broken Earth trilogy, but I know that everybody who's been reading fantasy is saying that this is wonderful work, and I'm really wanting to get down to it. I definitely want to read more fantasy in 2020, and so Broken Earth trilogy is part of that process. Next up we have an Italian classic, and that is Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. So I read If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino, and that is one of my favorite books of all times at this point. It's not for everybody, that I'll definitely say in advance, so before you go into it, for example, or if you've read it and you didn't like it, I understand, you know, it's very weird. It's like in If on a Winter's Night Traveler, you're basically given like 5 or 6 opening chapters to a book, and there's no really overarching plot or anything like that. It's very meta, it's very much about the art form of the novel rather than really being about a coherent story or anything like that. But I actually really love reflections on literature, reflections on language, on the meta level, so on the link between author and reader, for example. So that's something that was explored a lot If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. Invisible Cities, as the title mentions, is going to have something to do with cities, and I absolutely love exploring cities in literature. I did a paper on it while I was at a university as well, and so I really wanted to get down to it. I also saw somebody who had read it, who was kind of giving a talk about it, and really got me interested in this book. I've forgotten by now what it's going to be about actually, but so yeah, I really want to dig into this book. It's also very short. That's also to be said about If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, but due to its structure, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler does take a bit longer maybe. I don't know whether this is also as going to have a weird structure or anything like that, but it's a 150-page book. I hope to be able to prioritize it in 2020. Next up is a book I already read. Well, actually the next 2 books are, the final 2 books as well, are actually books that I already read, but I wanted to add them to my collection. First one is Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is the first Safran Foer that I read and the only Safran Foer that I don't own at this point. I don't know too much anymore about Here I Am by Safran Foer. I don't think it's the greatest introduction into his work. I definitely would say if you want to start with his work, to start with Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close. I still need to read his debut, Everything is Illuminated, but I did see the movie and I really liked it. But with Here I Am I was a bit underwhelmed, and so it took a very long time after reading Here I Am before I read another Safran Foer, which was Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. After reading Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, I immediately read Eating Animals, and I wanted to read Everything is Illuminated, but it just didn't fit in with my reading schedule at the time. But so I wanted to complete my collection and have Here I Am. Sadly now it's the one Safran Foer that I own that I don't have a signed copy of, because I met Safran Foer at a talk he was doing for the release of his newest book, We Are the Weather, I think in September, in September, and so I brought my entire collection of his works and had them signed, but Here I Am is missing now, but okay. I don't mind. So I just wanted to have it in my collection. I definitely want to reread it at some point. I know I have remembered one scene in here, and that's like the scene everybody remembers about this book. But I do want to get into it again and see like why was it, didn't I enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed his other works? Is it maybe because this book doesn't suit me as well, or maybe I might enjoy it better now after having had some more experiences with his work. We will find out at some point, hopefully. And finally, I have also bought The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. I have read this year, but at that point the paperback was still the bigger paperback. It was at least like 5 centimeters bigger. And since I have the 2 previous books in this edition, I wanted to get it in this edition as well. So Winter of the Witch is the concluding novel in the Baron the Nightingale trilogy. In the Baron the Nightingale trilogy, we follow our main character Vasia, who is living in Russia of I don't know which times, very long time ago, and it's very much got this like sort of dark fairy tale sort of atmosphere. So she is living in a very small town in winter in Russia, and there's this sort of and now I forget what his character was, but it was basically sort of like the king of the woods, let's call him, who was like the king of winter. I think he was a king of winter, and he's living in the woods. He's this very powerful but cruel and cold prince, or that's how he's depicted. But he has he develops a sort of soft spot for Vasia, and Vasia herself is actually seems to be a sort of being in between worlds. You know, she lives in the human world, but she has powers, and she's very much connected to the old world. And this series is very much about the sort of conflict between old world and new world, as the old world is kind of being pushed away by the new world, by Christianity, which is kind of making its way throughout Russia. And I really like this series. I preferred the first one, let me say. I think that the second one and the third one to me felt more like typical YA plots, versus the first one had a very different atmosphere to it than a typical YA. So I really loved the first one, but in all honesty, I read all 3 books I think in like 4 days total. So even if I thought the second and the third book weren't as good as the first one, clearly I still flew through them and still really enjoyed reading them. But so yeah, I wanted to complete my collection with the matching edition, so that's why I got this one. But so yeah, these are all the books that I bought in the last 2 months, I guess, or something like that. And as I said before, I'm going to try to keep myself from buying too many in the coming months, because I still have a lot to read back there. But so yeah, see you guys for my next video. I don't actually know when I'm republishing this video. Maybe I'll still make it in November. Maybe it'll be part of the December video schedule, or maybe it actually gets pushed to January when I'm going on holiday and actually need some videos for that time as well. So who knows when this is coming out? You do, but I don't. See you!